Hello, everybody. Welcome to Respawn Aim Fire. Today, we're going to bring you a little special treat. We're going to do a RAF review slash preview this time. It's a little different this time, but it's basically a RAF review. We're going to be reviewing Introversion Software's The Last Starship. Ooh, Chad, Starships.
Ooh, sounds spooky.
Spooky times. If you ever want to get videos, ref reviews and things like that early, you can go to patreon.com/respawnaimfire, get those videos a little bit early. But for everyone else, hey, hello, go to Patreon, enjoy us. Thank you to Vicarious PR for allowing me to cover the game. They were able to give me an early access code and allow me to review it. I appreciate that. But the reason I'm calling this a RAF preview instead of a review is because it is an early access game. So I will say that now. The game just came out in early access about a week ago. I've been playing it, for the past week, and I didn't want to just be like, oh, here's a score for this thing that is clearly going to get updates and be a different game by the time it comes full release. We know how PC games work. Most of us do. But Chad, I'm about to get into my just like the tippy top, and then I'm going to go into more like thorough thoughts. But do you have anything? You've only watched the trailer. You haven't played the game or anything.
I've watched the trailer and I've seen the screenshots from the press kit.
Yes. Now, is there anything before I get started, just random things, thoughts, or ideas that you have? I don't even think you like space management, so I don't know.
It seems like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like almost like a defense, like a real-time tower defense type thing where you're building up some things on your ship and then there's like a bullet hell outer thing where you're like your ship is fighting things based on what you set up. Is that true?
Sort of. I'll get into it. My top level thoughts is that I do think it's a very cool game. I think it's a very, very neat idea. And I think the bones of what this is going to become are super solid. But it is early access, and we'll get in more to it. I think there's definitely work to be done, more content to be added. But I think based on what we have at the beginning, I'm looking forward to it. As for who I think would like it, nerds. I'm being honest with you. Chad, I'm a nerd. I love numbers. I love sim strategy stuff. And it was all for me. They were like, hey, they're like, okay, this is from the makers of Prison Architect, if anyone's ever heard of that, which is a game where you literally just like build and maintain a prison. And then there's more crazy DLC later that makes it more wild. But it's like, hey, do you want to run a prison? Basically like Sim City, but lo-fi in a prison. And this game is Sim City, lo-fi in space. And we'll go into it. But your original question, like what the game is. So basically,
yeah.
It's like space exploration, kind of like space survival sim. Just like, in any other sim game, it's like, hey, I start out with, this basic thing. Again, SimCity specifically, like, oh, I start out with like a village or a town, and you eventually want to build a metropolis, right? And you want everything to work, and you want all the money to work, and everything to go perfectly, and sometimes stuff goes awry and you fix it. But you're basically like, how do I build the best of this thing? And that's what Last Starship is. The game starts you. So there are different scenarios, which basically like how advanced and ridiculous do you want the ship to be? And the first one they give you, it's like a science vessel. It's like, a medium-sized small ship. It doesn't take a lot to power and make it work. But I was like, I need this because I don't know how this game works. So let me figure this out. So basically, it's like, all right, I got my spaceship. Let me do all the things that make it work. Like, basically, you have things you put on top. So it's like a reactor and like a fuel injector. So it's like, all right, fuel injector. And then I draw a pipe to the reactor because the reactor needs fuel. And then from the reactor, I draw electrical wires so I can power my engines, that kind of a thing, right?
It's city planning. Yeah, but on a
city planning, but on a ship is exactly what it is. And then from there, it's like, oh, hey, there's a quote unquote anomaly happening. And you get like a galaxy map, or like a star system map where you get an FTL drive and you go from point to point to point, move around different spots on the map. But eventually there's a thing called an anomaly, and they're like, we don't know what's happening, but basically it's destroying everything. So you're eventually forced to move on from this map to the next map, and it's procedurally generated each time. So another game like the FTL is a similar thing where it's like you got a spaceship and you got to keep going until you get to the end. So that's what this is. It's like, hey, let me manage my spaceship, Sim City style, and then I have to keep going. And you're just progressing through the galaxy and things are happening on the way. It's the basics of it. And then there's more to it than that. You were talking specifically, I guess I'll bring up the combat. Well, so, all right, when you get the ship, you go forward. And at the moment, there's a couple things you can do. It is like, hey, you can move cargo, like basically be a space trucker, and you can make some money off of that. You can move civilians because they're like, hey, the world's dying. Can you move us to a different planet so we don't die immediately? And you can get money from that. You can also mine materials and then process materials. And then there is space combat, which is like, hey, go take care of these miscreants out here in the galaxy. And this is where I think the game is really cool and also needs some work and not as interesting. So it's not a bullet hell necessarily. It's like, all right, you make your ship, right? And again, the ship that I have is a science vessel, so it's not really made for war, but you can do it.
It's made for nerds.
It's made for big nerds in space. But basically, it's like, all right, cool. I have my engines on the back of the ship because that would make sense, right? But it doesn't maneuver super well. So if I go into a fight, it's kind of like, like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where it's like, hey, let me put my guns on the side so I shoot things that are on the side of me. So my guns have to be lined up for me to shoot. But you can actually put guns anywhere you want. So I went a little crazy and I was like, all right, I'm putting guns on the wings, on the back of the wings, on the sides, I put a cannon on the front, and it just had guns everywhere. So I was able to just go in there, and as long as something's lined up, it'll, you hit the button, it'll fire. It's like weapons free and everything goes at it. So it's like a real time, like, all right, do positioning, and it goes out there and it kills some stuff. Where it can use a little work where you have to, and it's kind of interesting. So you can like get more ships into your fleet. So it's like, I have a science vessel, but let me go buy a fighter ship. It's smaller, it maneuvers better because again, if you don't line up, you won't shoot. So it's like, it's got a bunch of thrusters on it so it can do like full spins and all that nonsense. It's smaller, but it's quicker and I can go in there and do damage. But the thing is that you're doing combat and it's literally like, all right, I click on my guy and I move him here and that is what you do. And you need to position it. It's not like, hey, can go attack him and then it does like, it follows him down like an RTS. It's not like, hey, go attack and then your guys go attack. Yeah. You physically have to move everybody point to point, which is fine if you have one ship, but when you're like 2 or 3 ships, and then it's like, well, I got to constantly click this guy, move him here, make sure this guy's lined up here. And it's interesting, but I feel it gets a little cumbersome in the combat in that way. The minute that you have more than one ship or you're trying to do something advanced, it becomes a little much. So I'll give them that. Again, early access, I'm willing to forgive a lot of stuff, but I think combat needs a little work once it gets more complex. So if it's just me against this dude, hop alongside him, shoot him on the side, whatever. The minute it gets more than that, it's a little rough. So yes, you can mine, you can cargo stuff. At the moment, I think there's like a story mission where it's like, hey, you come to this new place and it's like, hey, move the gremlins. They're like little fuzzy balls. And they're like, move the gremlins over here. We'll pay you some money. But every time you jump, they reproduce. And by the time I got there, I started with 8 and there was 197 by the time I dropped them off.
Holy crap.
These little gremlins running around my ship. So again, that was cool to be like, oh, cool. It's like a little different mission instead of just carry this to this to this to this. And the reason you do missions is because you get money. You can build out your ship, bigger ships, buy more ships. Again, the idea is like, let me build a fleet and keep going. But at the moment, that's all that it is. It's like, let me do these couple missions. I got the gremlin mission. And outside of that, I just keep going, but I'm not getting anything new. Again, I think it's part of the early access. So I'm going to need either like a story or different mission types or whatever, and all that can be added. But at the moment, it is like, all right, let me build out my ship, but there's not a lot of like reason to keep doing it past, you get like 2 or 3 hours in and you've basically seen all the content that's in the early access period so far.
What does the actual like mining look like? You mentioned like you can mine.
Yeah.
What does that look like in this? Is it just like a send some people out, quote unquote, to go mining, and then you wait 15 in-game minutes, and then they're back with some materials? Like, is it that kind of thing?
So you go on the map, you can see like, all right, if I travel here, there's a bunch of asteroids around here. So you go there to the asteroids, and you can put mining lasers on your ship, just like you put weapons. And then you have to have a drone bay, and you'll shoot the laser at the asteroids, and then the drones will go out and collect the stuff for you. Same thing with like salvaging a ship. Like if you find a dead ship, you're like, all right, drones, go out and get stuff. But again, you have to buy the drone bay. You have to buy the drones beforehand. So it's a little bit like build up, and then you can do that. So it's basically, use my laser, go out and get these materials, and bring them back. And then you can like either sell them off or refine them, or there's missions with them and all that. That's cool. And then you'll run into other people where it's like, I'm also mining stuff out here just randomly. So you can like go and be like, let me yoink that from this guy and stuff like that. So it is like...
Are these real people or are these NPCs?
These are all NPCs. Yeah.
Okay.
Not real folks out there, because then they'd just shoot me immediately, I'm assuming. So there is like other ships in the world and like people doing stuff, or NPCs doing stuff. But that isn't. Yeah, there's basically like 5 really interesting things you can do. Like I said, after 2 or 3 hours, you've reached the limit of that. Now again, I've seen people with like ships that have like 100 like crew members in them, and they're massive ships, and they basically like run themselves. I wasn't at that level, so maybe it's more interesting to like build up to building a massive like dreadnought. But I was like, hey, me and my science dorks, we're out here doing some basic missions. It's fine. So there's like, again, it's a city builder. It's a nerdy. I have to love micromanaging and wanting to slowly build things up is the basics of the game.
Gotcha.
Yeah, let me see. I have some more things on the list. I'm going to read the rest of my list. Do you have any other questions specifically? Because I'm reading
No, I
this
kind of
over.
like the art style. It's like this. It looks like a SNES, almost like if Among Us were on SNES is kind of what it looks like to me.
Definitely like, hey, this game would definitely work on like, I don't want to say a Game Boy, but like definitely like a Switch or mobile. Like it's like a chill, like I said like lo-fi. Like, yeah, absolutely. Among Us, but you're building a ship instead of killing people on a ship. All right, so I've talked about mission types, doing resources. That mission was cool. Talk about some of the negatives. I will say at the beginning, again, I do like this game. I think it's cool. Go out, build your thing up. It is micromanage Spaceship, the video game. The tutorial at the beginning is very limited, and it's pretty rough. I had basically restarted this game 3 times, I think, because I was learning stuff, and I was like, oh, well, I wish I would have known this 30 minutes ago. I'm not going to waste my time, and just stopped and go back. Because at the very beginning, it's like, hey, put this here, draw a line here, draw a line here. Your ship's ready to go. And then that's it. And it doesn't tell you. Like later in the game, I wrote down, explain poop story here. So basically, because, your people need food and water to survive. And you can buy all that every time you go to port. Or I have, it's like you have to get like a water, basically you get like a water like recycling plant. Like you get, a machine that cleans the water, and then another machine that purifies that water, and then your guys can drink basically their own urine water after it's been cleaned. But the game never so you have to buy a specific piece that's like a sewage pipe, because everyone lives above the deck and not on the main floor. So I build out like, my whole irrigation, like, all right, this is the cleaner, this is this and that, but I didn't have the pipe that takes the sewage out of the ship into the thing. So I was just driving around with like 1,000 sewage in my thing. And I was like, I have no idea how to clean this whatsoever. And then I eventually got to a port and went to like trade, and it was like, oh, here's a sewage pipe. It's like, thanks, and I know how to do this. But again, it doesn't tell you like, here's a way to like get clean water from your dirty ship. You just either have to look online or know it. And again, maybe they'll add that tutorial later, but at the beginning, all it is, hey, here's how to build engines, and here's how to jump. Have fun, and that's it. And I'm like, I'd like a little bit more. Like, please explain anything in the actual game. That would be great. So that is...
Yeah, I imagine those like tutorial type things are usually like the afterthought. They're usually like, all right, the game's there, all the systems are in place. Now, how do we get people to use it? I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, the bones are great. I just don't know how to use the bones yet.
Yeah.
And it's fun to learn, but then it's like, man, I feel like I wasted my time. Let me go to another thing. So yeah, I wish I understood the poop system a little bit sooner. But again, once you figure out like, oh, okay, cool. But it's like, man, I want to go back and maximize my time and actually do the poop thing correctly. Instead of constantly having to buy water for stuff. A couple things, again, I'm sure they'll improve stuff. Whenever you do missions and stuff, it's like, hey, like cargo. It's like, hey, go deliver this 30 packages of cargo. And they just drop it at like your front door or like your airlock. And you have to like draw an area to like for your guys to like push it into storage. But again, it doesn't tell you that. And it's also just like in the middle of the ground. So it's like, all right, this section of the ship is just a big yellow square where they know to just drop stuff. And that was it. It'd be cool if there was like another system to like stack stuff up or something. But it's just like, no, there's just 30 boxes on the floor in the middle of my ship. And I'm like, all right, well, that's cool. I'm going to drop it off and get some money. But this little thing. But yeah, like I said, I like the bones there. I really like the micromanaging stuff. I would like more story, motivation, tutorials in the future. And again, with it being early access, that could happen anytime. I would love to come back to this game in 6 months or a year and be like, oh man, they put all that stuff in there that I complained about, and it's really, really cool now. So, and then I think the combat can be a little more be improved a little bit. I think I think everything here is interesting. I just wanted to put more time into it. And again, I think it's the boys in early access, so it's fine. Yeah, do you have any other questions, or I'll go into my final thoughts on this one?
No.
Okay.
Let's wrap it up.
Very cool. Like I said, I think it's a good game. The ship stuff is very strong. Like, again, they understood the assignment, like, hey, let's make a cool shipbuilder, because that stuff is awesome. I think everything around it's going to need more work, more content, and definitely a better onboarding tutorial, because just telling me how to move forward is not enough. Like I said, I think what they have here is a good idea. If anything I've said is interesting, if you're like spaceship FTL management, check it out. If you want to wait for more content, I think that's completely fine, because again, I played it for about 5 or 6 hours and I think I've seen everything that's in the early access. So I would understand you wanting to wait, but I think what there is really cool. So yeah, I guess I want to check it out later. And I'll probably come back to it because I do think it's pretty cool. So that's basically all my thoughts on this RAF reviews for The Last Starship.
Dope. Is it? You said it's early access. It's Steam only right now?
I believe so. I had got a Steam code. I didn't see it anywhere else. With it being early access, I'm assuming PC only, and yeah, Steam.
Yeah.
Steam for sure. You can definitely get it there. I believe it's also on GOG. So yeah.
Dope.
Very cool. All right. Do you want to do our normal preambles at the end and just let us out of here? Now, like we said before, just check out we have a podcast and YouTube channel, Respawn Aim Fire. We do podcasts every week. Check out all the YouTube stuff. We're going to put a lot more stuff up on there, reviews, previews, and the such. And yeah, this was the RAF reviews for The Last Starship. Goodbye, everybody.